Toronto. My name is John Kyo, and welcome to the Future of Food 10 by 10 academic series. In this series, I speak with 10 professors for 10 minutes to get their views on what's happening in the food industry and to understand what they're working on. And today I'm delighted to have with me, all the way from Australia, Professor Michelle Colgrave. Hello, Michelle.
Hi there, John.
And you're in Brisbane?
That's right, I'm in Brisbane this week. Sometimes I'm in Perth, but this week I'm in Brisbane.
Wonderful. Well, Michelle, I'm going to put you on the spot straight away. And if you can, in 1 minute, give us the quick overview of your bio and also the organization or organizations that you work with.
Great, thank you. So I hold the role of Professor of Food and Agricultural Proteomics. And that's both here at CSIRO, but I also hold a joint position at Edith Cowan University in Perth. So CSIRO is Australia's national research and science agency, and it really pushes the boundaries in terms of innovation, science and technology, and it's been doing that for over a century now. CSIRO is composed of about 5,000 talented people, and their aim is to deliver impact nationally, globally, and through really close collaborations with industry, government, and even communities. So we're known for quite a few different breakthroughs. There's one that I can't show you, which is Wi-Fi, but I do have some props here, so I thought I'd show you some. Polymeric banknotes, or a CSIRO invention. But in the space of food and agriculture, which is where I sit, we've been working on increasing productivity and efficiencies at the farm level, improving the quality and yield of crops, developing innovative food processing technologies, and creating new value-added products, including foods. And so that's where I can again show you another prop of something I was involved with, which is a gluten-free beer. And that was made from a gluten-free barley that my colleagues at CSIRO were able to generate over the last 7 years.
That's wonderful. And lots of impressive stuff coming out of CSIRO for sure. From your vantage point, Michelle, what are you seeing as the key issues that the food industry is dealing with, and how are you addressing some of those issues?
Yeah, so my area of research, my domain is really in the use of proteomics. So proteomics is the study of proteins, and that's usually done in the context of a tissue, a cell, or an organism. But in food, it's really quite complex. You're not just dealing with a single organism, you're dealing with every ingredient that you might use when you're preparing a meal. So if you think about that, you're actually studying many organisms at one time. So that's, I guess, the area of work that I work in. But in terms of the industry, what they need to understand is proteins, because proteins themselves can be allergens, and they can also be proteins that cause intolerance. So the area of research we've been focused in is gluten intolerance. And so in this instance, we're talking about celiac disease, which affects about 1% of the population. And we're also interested in gluten intolerance, which can affect up to another 10% of the population. So it's quite significant. And with this intolerance, or also with allergens, there's no cure. So having no cure means that the consumers who are facing those issues have to actually maintain a strict gluten-free or allergen-free diet. So with that in place, then what it comes down to food manufacturers to make sure that the products they're producing are truly gluten-free or allergen-free. And so a big issue is around how we can potentially test for those allergens and how we can make sure that the labeling that goes onto food products is accurate. And in that way, what we need to, that gives, I guess, the consumers that safety in terms of making sure that they're not going to inadvertently make themselves sick.
Right, and in that calibration of that process, if a company brings a product to market and they're claiming on the label that it's gluten-free, is the onus on them to prove that before they launch the product? Or do we have to rely on the government to do market surveillance to find that out, or unfortunately a consumer to get ill?
Yeah, look, it's probably a little bit of all of the scenarios that you painted there, because every jurisdiction has different rules around the way that they look at labeling. And in most cases, there are some commodities such as allergens that there are mandatory labeling laws around, and so then the responsibility lies with the food manufacturer. But there are other commodities that go into foods that are voluntary labeling, and so then so for example, you don't have to put a gluten-free label on a tin of tomatoes. That's just not necessary. Tomatoes are inherently gluten-free. but there are other products where you may start to see those ingredients entering the food stream. So there is certainly a responsibility of the food manufacturer, but then regulators in different jurisdictions will also go in and do audits or will look at compliance with whatever regulations are in place in that country. And sometimes, unfortunately, we are getting the reports that consumers are getting sick, and that then, you know, will hopefully trigger some sort of investigation and feedback to the manufacturers.
Wonderful. And I believe you made a breakthrough recently in gluten testing, right?
Yeah, that's right. So for a number of years, well, for you know, as long as I can recall, the gluten detection has been done using ELISAs, or it's an antibody-based technique. And that works really well in raw ingredients, in commodities, but it doesn't work so well in food because food's really complex. It contains all these multiple ingredients that I talked about, but it also has been baked or extruded, coated in sugar. So there's a lot of complexity to measuring proteins in food ingredients. And some of those antibody-based techniques don't do so well in those complex environments. And so what we've been doing is developing an alternative technology known as mass spectrometry to be able to detect those proteins. And I guess the benefit is that it's a direct measurement. So we're using the mass spectrometer to go in and directly measure what is in a food product. And so if you have gone through a process where your protein has been coated in sugar and baked, and perhaps that's changed the conformation of the protein so that no longer can that antibody react with and detect that particular protein. Whereas what we're doing is we're using this direct measure of what's in there, and it will tell us, yes, you still have the gluten protein in the food product, but it's modified in some way, but it's still there. So what we've been doing is developing this technology specifically to measure all of the gluten-containing grains. So over the years, we've developed methods for wheat, for barley, for oats, and recently we've just published our work on rye. Rye was a little elusive for a number of years because it wasn't as well studied as some of those other grains. And so the result was that we didn't have the genomic resources coming through that we would be able to use to detect those rye proteins, but now we have that, and we've got essentially the quadrella. We have methods that work across all 4 ingredients.
Wonderful. So when you talk about mass spectrometry, we're typically talking about an analytical laboratory and science-based testing, laboratory-based testing. Do you think your test will be commercialized and democratized where we can go mobile with it at some point?
Look, I would love to see mass spectrometers in backpacks or in a handheld device, but that's probably not practical in the near future. I think that what we're doing is we're developing a test that can be put into analytical labs so that any food manufacturer can access it. But additionally, we're also creating this foundational knowledge about what happens during food processing. And perhaps we'll define better targets that can be used for a more rapid and portable test that is what's more accepted within the community right now.
That's very impressive and very scientific. So it's impressive what's coming out of CSIRO for sure, and out of your university. Michelle, the time goes very fast, but in the last 30 seconds, if you're up in front of 50 new scholars, master's degree students, PhD students, they're starting off their career in food science, what guidance would you give them?
Okay, so I think I would start by asking them to think about the impact of their work. Many young scientists will think about publications and seminars, and these are really outputs, and they're incredibly important to disseminate that knowledge to the community. But when we think about impact, it's about how we can do that science and have it adopted or uptaken by industry or the community. So for us, I think it's about thinking about impact. What's the impact for society, for the environment, for the economy, and then we can take a step back and think about how we can deliver those outputs towards that end goal.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Australia, Professor Michelle Colgrave. Michelle, I want to thank you very much for sharing this with us today. Congratulations on your recent breakthrough, and I wish you and your laboratory team, your university team, continued success in the future.
Thank you very much, and thanks for hosting me.
Thank you.